No se quitó. Ahí está ya. Está, a ver, apriétale está abierto el micrófono, ahorita se te está escuchando. Aprieta el micrófono para cancelarlo. Ahí apriétale.
No está la flechita.
Ya, ya. A ver. Vuélvele a apretar.
Hello, Eileen. This is Cassandra, the translator. Good afternoon, sisters. Can you hear me?
Yes, hear you really well, Cassandra. Thank you.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I'm not sure who is moderating or leading the ceremony, but I do cordially request that all participants speak close to their microphone and nice and loud, because we're doing some fancy footwork here to connect with Bolivia and Guatemala, and it's gonna really help if everybody can speak up nice and loud.
Great, Cassandra, I will make sure to remind people of that periodically. And if you have any trouble, just unmute and tell me, or send me a chat and tell me, but we will do our really very best. We're so happy that Mary Peter's friends in Guatemala and Bolivia are with us, and that you, Cassandra, on short notice could provide this excellent service. Thank you.
Oh, well, I'm honored, and I hope that this works. Now, it is working so far. Just for your information, I don't think I'll be able to chat because I'm going to have two phones in my hand.
Got it?
But I will try to unmute if I'm having some trouble hearing, or if there's something that we need to communicate about. Is that all right?
Sure, that's fine. This is not a Broadway production. This is this is Loretto folks and family, and we can do what we need to do. Don't worry about it.
Oh, well, thank you, and I am so happy to be a part of this, and I'm glad that you can hear me and I can hear you. So
Yes.
that is promising.
And we will be fine. We're going to start the evening at the Mother House in Kentucky, and Sister Johanna Bryan will be the moderator there, and there will be, I think you have do you have the program?
I do not.
Okay. There will be,
You could put it on the chat, please.
I'll do my best.
I can send it to her.
Thank you, Rosa. But Cassandra, there will be some prayers and chanted hymns and other people speaking from the Mother House, probably for 20 minutes or so before we get into sharing. And then people at the Mother House will share what they wish to share. Individuals will speak. And then we will go to Guatemala. And then we will go to Bolivia. And then we will go to El Paso. And then we will go to Denver. And then we will go to St. Louis. And then we will go everywhere else where there are people who want to share.
Okay.
And then we will go back after all of the sharing. We will go back to the Mother House in Kentucky to conclude.
All right, excellent. Thank you for giving me the sort of shape of the ceremony. That's really helpful.
Okay, thank you. And just, let me know if you need anything, please.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Ujú.
No, antes de que le informamos. Es como hembra.
Oh, what glory, far exceeding all the eye has yet perceived. Holiest hearts forever pleading, never that full joy conceived. God has promised, Christ prepares it. There on high our welcome waits. The humble spirit shares it. Christ has passed the eternal gates.
There's Pilar.
Good evening to each and every one of you as we gather to celebrate the life of Sister Mary Peter Bruce. Peter loved celebrations, so welcome to everyone who is joining us for this celebration. The local community gathered here in the community room, folks joining us from the infirmary, people and internationally, friends of Peter who are joining us from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Bolivia. And finally, a very special welcome to Peter's family, her sister Lillian, Lillian's husband John, her nieces and nephews who are joining us. So that everyone will be included, there will be a translator who will translate every word of our celebration from English to Spanish. Eileen Harrington will be our Zoom host for the evening. So let us begin. Gentle God, in your love for all living things, You gather us into your arms at death and hold us in your love. We come together this evening to remember Sister Mary Peter and to give thanks for her life. She was family and friend to us. As you led her in this life, so now we ask that you lead her into the fullness of life in your loving presence. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. And now we will have a biography of Mary Peter, prepared by Eleanor Craig, the archivist.
Please make yourselves comfortable. I could not make this short. Mary Peter Bruce was the eldest daughter of James Bruce and Dolores Novoa, known as Lola. They named her Dolores Patricia and called her Patsy. She had 3 siblings, Lillian, Jimmy, and Johnny, many cousins in Mexico and in the United States, plus Celia, a young girl whose mother had died and who, as Mary Peter said, my parents received into our home. Celia became like my big sister and helped take care of Jimmy and Lillian, who were still small. Mary Peter, or Patsy, treasured her family. She had many, many stories of visits with her Mexican and her American relatives. Family meant both loving relationships and cultural home for Patsy. Patsy's father had come to Mexico from Denver to work as an accountant with a construction company. He later worked for Price Waterhouse as an auditor and served in World War II as a government auditor. In Mexico, Jim met and married Patsy's mother, Lola, who insisted that he promise they would always live in Mexico. Lola was very beautiful. She was also secretary to the president of an important charitable foundation serving the poor. Lola's parents and grandparents were from Spain and France. In Mexico, she had a large extended family and others still in Spain and France. Mary Peter's richly detailed stories of her childhood describe visits to aunts and uncles and travels with her parents on working vacations to colorful places in Mexico. There were also extended visits to the Bruce relatives in Denver and to Lola's brother in San Antonio. A friend once told Mary Peter, "I love to be with your mother. She will talk of anything you want, and she knows so much. If I want to speak in English, she will speak in English. If I want to speak in Spanish, your mother will talk Spanish. She will talk in French or Italian. She will talk about art and music and so many more things. I just love your mother." Lola's daughter, Patsy, grew to be very like herself. Patsy spoke Spanish as her native language, and English, French, and Italian in the family as well. Later, she would master Portuguese and the Aymara language of indigenous Bolivians. Much later, Lola wrote, "I was proud of my mother and father. Everyone said I shouldn't, but I was glad I married Jim Bruce because being of different nationalities brought about a wonderful family. I used to feel strongly that being a Mexican of our aristocratic class was a good thing. Also about being of French background. I've changed my mind. And now I think I am very lucky to have been an American." With relatives of several nationalities and cultures, Patsy regularly traveled internationally, developing great skill in crossing borders and cultures. The Bruces moved to San Jose, Costa Rica for a year when Patsy was about 12, and to San Antonio, Texas, when her father was called to the US Army a year later. In San Antonio, she finished grade school and started high school. The family moved to Denver at the end of the war, and Jim took over the family business, the Centennial School Supply Company. Patsy enrolled for her sophomore year at Holy Family High School and got to know the Sisters of Loretto. April of her senior year, Patsy wrote to Reverend Mother Edwarda, "Ever since the time I made my first Holy Communion, I have had the desire to dedicate my life to God alone. I will graduate from Holy Family in June, and I would like very much to enter the novitiate soon after that. I came to Holy Family from San Antonio 3 years ago. At that time, I wanted to become a missionary sister of the Sacred Heart. Now, however, I am convinced that if you will, in your kindness, accept me, I will do everything in my power, and with the aid of our Lord, be a worthy member of your community." I had a hard time convincing my father, but I finally succeeded. Patsy Bruce arrived at Loretto Mother House on October 25th, 1950, with a crop of 16, including Evelyn Houlihan, Imelda Therese Marquez, Claudette Laporto, and Magdalena McCloskey. They were received on April 25th, 1951, Patsy receiving the name Sister Mary Peter, by which she was known the rest of her life. She made her first vows 2 years later and was missioned immediately, a year at Mary Queen of Peace, 3 years at Immaculate Conception, and 1 year at Mount Carmel, all in various parts of suburban St. Louis, which allowed her to work on her undergraduate degree at Webster College at the same time. She completed a BA in education in 1958 and was sent to Bishop Tulane High School, but only for a year. Then she was back in St. Louis to study full-time at St. Louis University, where she completed a master's degree in Spanish and Latin American studies in 1 year. It was 1960, and both Loretto and the Catholic Church were looking to South America as a new mission. Early in the summer, Mother Mary Luke Tobin invited Mary Peter to accompany her to select a mission site. And in October of 1960, 3 Lorettos set out for Bolivia by boat, taking with them the furniture, books, household supplies, and all that was needed to create a school from scratch in La Paz. The founding educators were Carol Dunphy, Eva Salas, and Mary Peter. They began with just the primary classes, and over the next dozen years established a solid grade and high school program in a handsome building. Mary Peter contributed in many ways to the first 3 years, becoming acquainted at the same time with the indigenous Aymara and other Indians in the Altiplano outside La Paz. The little ones of her first classes have remained staunchly attached to her and are among the many from whom we have heard in this week since Peter's death. November 1963 saw Mary Peter again in the States, visiting family and then enrolling for the spring semester at Marquette University to study new approaches to adult evangelization. In the fall, she went to France to the University of Strasbourg, again studying the evangelizing of adults. The year in France gave her a chance to get acquainted with her French relatives in Biarritz. Mary Peter completed the advanced program in religious studies in June of 1965 and returned to La Paz to work for the Diocesan Commission of Catechetics. Soon she was overseeing the formation of deacons among the Aymara Indians and developing lifelong friendships with these peoples of the Altiplano. Mary Peter insisted that the deacons' wives be part of the training. To improve communications among the widely scattered Aymara, Mary Peter created Radio San Gabriel and trained young Native women to produce the radio programs. After 10 years in La Paz, Mary Peter returned permanently to the United States and to a very difficult reentry. From 1978 to 81, she moved from place to place, task to task, and job to job, while she struggled to reconcile the tumult of cultures, languages, and experiences within her that threatened to cut her off from her community in the United States. She spent 9 months with clergy and laity concerned in Washington, D.C., living in a communal setting at Tabor House with advocates and former missionaries from South America. She accepted first one and then another position in catechetics in the Diocese of El Paso. In the fall of 1981, Mary Peter was able to settle into the kind of companionable, informal teaching that was her strongest, surest contribution. In El Paso, she mentored individual Mexican and immigrant women whose children attended Liceo Sylvan School. When the school closed, because Mary Peter had succeeded in having the children admitted to the public schools, she and those she mentored created a variety of opportunities for immigrant women, including a sewing cooperative, other entrepreneurial enterprises, and a language school in which the immigrants taught Spanish to English-speaking clergy and religious. Mary Peter and the women honed their language training into a book, Tui Yo, which they later published. It is a workbook for partners, one of whom knows Spanish and the other who wants to learn Spanish. In 1989, Mary Peter moved to Denver. She worked in the same companionable, informal way with various Loretto groups, sometimes on the administration staff, always sharing her language skills, her deep capacity for empathy with the poor and marginalized, her wide knowledge and firm understanding of international issues, whether it be immigration, global conditions of women, or racial discrimination. Mary Peter went out of her way to experience, study, and bring back to Loretto and others the interconnections among many social problems. She traveled widely to the International Conference on Women in Beijing, back to Bolivia to introduce Vicky Quatman to the Aymara. She traveled to seminars, study groups, action groups, and of course, to join other Lorettos at the SOA and other national demonstrations and marches. In the mid-1990s, Mary Peter participated with others in developing the sister community relationship with the Holy Family Sisters in Guatemala. In 1999, she and Eva Salas created Casa Loreto, the House for Loretto Volunteers in Denver. For 4 years, Mary Peter served at the UN headquarters in New York City as Loretto's NGO. Her language skills and her wide knowledge opened for Loretto many ways of engaging women
I
across
don't know
the
why
globe.
it's in that mode.
Completing her term at the UN, she returned to El Paso and to the mentoring and companionable kinds of teaching that were her gifts. One-on-one ESL teaching, translating for individuals and groups, introducing Loretto and other visitors to the immigrant problems on the border. And of course, she continued to travel. When finally she retired to Loretto Mother House in 2015, she kept up this activity and her thinking and reading, her steady conversation that was both companionable and instructive. She was present to the world. As we in Loretto committed ourselves to grapple with our own racial and cultural biases, Mary Peter graciously revealed ourselves to us, saying, I know you don't recognize your bias. Let me share with you how I have experienced your unconscious bias in my life with you. A natural teacher, Mary Peter was willing to use her experiences and understanding to help us overcome our unconscious racism, even to the point of showing us the hurts and wounds she had received. For example, she spoke of her student days when, having written the best essay in her class at Holy Family, she was told that another student would read it for the parents because she had an accent. She was aware that her accent and her dual culture were stumbling blocks. Yet, ever gracious and compassionate, Mary Peter also said she could understand how it was so because she could find bias in herself. Mary Peter Bruce died in the 70th year of her life as a sister of Loretto, in her 89th year as a child of God and sister to all the world. Her ambition was ever to work for what she called a friendly peace among people. On Tuesday of this past Holy Week, she wrote in a spiral notebook the names of her Aymara sisters and brothers, the names of her aunts and uncles and cousins, the names of friends, co-workers, colleagues, the names of students, young and old. She wrote, quote, in the separation of the coronavirus, as we are hearing of so many suffering and dying, the majority of us here at the infirmary are only receiving all that we need to stay healthy. We do what we can not to bother the helpers. Those of us who are patients in the infirmary have the fortune to be cared for, allowed to be thinkers, and see the world and our societies from the perspective of our privileged age. I am remembering my mother, my father, the staff in the infirmary, my Loretto family. Thanks to all for all you did for me. Thank you, God.
We need to pause for just a moment. At the Mother House,
This is the Zoom host. At the Mother House, they're having some technical difficulties and they're going to leave the meeting and rejoin and hope that their connection is better when they do that. So we're just going to take a pause for a moment. If you would all remain unmuted or muted, that would be really good. Thanks so much for your patience, everyone. They're still working on it at the Mother House.
You have put into my heart a marvelous love for the faithful ones who dwell in your land.
O Lord, it is you who are my portion and cup. It is you yourself who are my prize. I will bless you, God.
And that you direct my heart.
I keep you ever in my sight. My soul is glad. With you at my right hand, I shall stand firm.
And so my heart rejoices, my soul is glad. Even my body shall rest in safety.
You have shown me the path of life, the fullness of joy in your presence. At your right hand, happiness forever. Amen.
If I could ask everyone at the Mother House, when you speak, get really close to the microphone and speak loudly, please, so our translator can make sure to hear every word. Thank you.
I choose life. Throughout my life, I accepted God's gift of life around me, the sacred treasure of each human being, whether mother, father, sister, brother, friend, or stranger, rich or poor, ill or well, ally or enemy, or indifferent. Each, I believed, was crafted in God's image. To each was offered Christ's redemption, and in each moved the Spirit's blessing. I chose life. Now I accept God's gift of life in my dying. In God's hands, the shaping of the manner, and by God's clock, the counting of the hour.
Our charism of loving service, rooted in Jesus on the cross and Mary at the foot of the cross, shapes and forms us. From I am the way. Our Lady of Guadalupe stood with the poor, shaping so much of the work Mary Peter and others have done. Let us honor Mary by reciting the Hail Mary in Spanish or English. Hail Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
And now a poem read by Lillian Moskland.
How do I unmute myself? Oh, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
You're good, Lillian.
Thank you. The poem is Remember by Christina Rossetti. Remember me when I am gone away, gone far away into that silent land, when you can no more hold me by the hand, nor I have turned to go, yet turning stay. Remember me when no more day by day you tell me of our future that you planned. Only remember me. You understand it will be late to counsel then, or pay, or pray. Yet if you should forget me for a while, and afterwards remember, do not grieve. For if the darkness and corruption leave a vestige of the thoughts that I once had, better by far you should forget and smile than that you should remember and be sad.
This evening, we stand with Mary Peter at the foot of the cross, remembering in these troubled times all who are suffering. We stand with Our Lady of Guadalupe, who ministered so lovingly to the poor. Mary was concerned about the poor in her lifetime. May we all learn from Our Lady of Guadalupe and from Mary Peter how to be present to the suffering peoples of the world, holding them close to our hearts. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. At this time, we will share our memories of Mary Peter. We'll start with the community here at the Mother House.
Johanna, we hear you, but your video is frozen. So if each person who comes to the microphone could please say who she is, or he is, or they are, and speak really loudly into the microphone, it'll all be good.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Lupe Arciniega. I was the fourth member of the community to go to La Paz, Bolivia. And Peter and I were roommates in the same room there. We had a lot of fun. People will probably share other things about Peter and community life. But the day before she died, Lillian had told me that Peter was very sick. And well, we were told here too. But I decided to call her on the phone, and the phone rang, and finally she answered the phone. And she was happy that I had called. And she said, Lupe, I feel such a sense of gratitude. My whole life, I am grateful. And, you know, I'm ready to go to heaven. And from there, I am going to help everybody. So she was still continuing to work. And then she said, please let Beth Blossom in the UN tell her that I'm on my way to heaven, and tell her to tell other folk from the UN. And she couldn't remember her name, and that I couldn't help her. And then she said, and let the people in Bolivia know. So I did. I am in contact with some of the women we taught, and they immediately with Facebook sent messages. As Eleanor read in her biography, that the young girls she taught in first grade continued to
to communicate with Peter, and some of them came here to the Mother House to visit. Now, this note came on August 8th, and it says, the 1972 class of Loreto College, named Eva Marie Salas, sends its heartfelt condolences to the Loreto community for the death of our dearest teacher, our lovely mentor, Dolores Bruce, Sister Mary Peter. Our deepest sympathy to all members at the Loreto Mother House, and especially to Sisters Evita, Angie, and Lupe. Sister Mary Peter was our first grade teacher. So many years ago, we were very fortunate to have had her teaching and to keep in touch all these years. Her memory and the education for life we received will always remain with us. She, along with all our Loreto teachers, led us to live in a changing world with a sense of respect and solidarity as independent women confronting challenges. Our commitment is to keep the spirit of Loreto as a tribute to Sister Mary Peter and all of the wonderful and dear sisters that raised us with love. Rest in peace, Mary Peter. Your example inspires us. May God have you in his glory. And that same, one of the girls or women from this class, her message came from Munich, Germany. And she says, fly high, Dolores. You have been an icon in our lives and you always gave us strength. We will never forget your values. You will forever be in our hearts. And among Peter's things, I found a picture that was in the newspaper of this first graduating class. There were about 70 of them. And then another message came from another class. It says, condolences for Mary Peter. Maria G. de Solares, class of 1974 from Loreto College, La Paz, Bolivia, sends its deepest condolences to the Loreto community, Narings, Kentucky, USA, for the passing of our unforgettable and beloved teacher, Sister Dolores Bruce, Mary Peter, Piedrita. Piedrita means little rock. Piedra, rock, Piedrita, little rock. May she rest in peace. Mary Peter was our first grade teacher. She taught us how to read, write, and think in English. She gave us our first lessons to become good women for society and within our families. Her religious duties took her to the Bolivian Plateau and to Radio San Gabriel, of which she was the founder along with other people. She loved Bolivia, especially Tiwanaku. She had a special affection for the indigenous women of this country and left fond memories over our lifetime. The Pachamama, Mother Earth, receives her with love. She visited us several times in the last decade. Each one of her visits was a celebration for our hearts. We love her, and we will honor her memory for the rest of our lives. Peace in her grave. Piedrita found eternal rest. Peace in your grave. Rejoice in God. Then from this same class, Jenny Barnigaray says, Piedrita, the seeds you planted produced a great harvest. Rest in peace. Another, Patricia Eckerman from another class says, what a loss, but she left us memories that will never be forgotten. May God keep her in his care. Then Susie Saravia de Ritter wrote on August 7th, and I don't know which class she was in, but she says, my first grade teacher, a wonderful role model, and one of my favorite sisters, nuns, passed away yesterday. I think I know I wanted to live in the land that the sisters came from, just from the wonderful positive experience I had with them as my teachers. Thank you for all the love, caring, patience, and positive role modeling you gave us, dear Sister Maria Pedro. You will always live in my heart. Now, this message came from the other part of Peter's life in Bolivia, our co-member Ana Maria Vargas, and she also contacted the deacons, indigenous deacons that Mary Peter trained. Now, Ana Maria Vargas shared these words with us. I am sharing memories of our beloved Piedra, who put the foundation to build an indigenous and inclusive church. Maria Pedro offered these words as Claudio Patti was ordained a priest at Tiwanaku. Father Claudio, now this is Peter speaking. Father Claudio Patti, you were a model native priest. The image of a native church with your identity being Aymara and Christian. Your sight was set on the indigenous youth so you could guide future leaders at the service of their culture and church. Like Ayayu, Ayayu means spirit in Aymara. You were always present in the Alaxpache, I don't know what that is, here and there. Halala, halalala, tata kalawayu. Halalala means that what we are saying will become a reality. Then this Father Claudio Patti was Mary Peter's student in her deacon formation program in the Bolivia's Altiplano in La Paz, Bolivia. He shares this about Mary Peter. Thank you, Apu. Apu means God, and Diostate, which means God the Father, for Maria Pedro's mission of peace and love. You, Maria Pedro, gave testimony as catechist, deacon, priest, and a religious woman to the indigenous Aymara Quechua. You were the soul of the evangelization, and with your smile, you confirmed God's call, and you blessed us as a mother with the gifts you had received from heaven. Thanks for your guidance in the leaders' formation, particularly in the Church of the Altiplano Boliviano. From heaven, you still will be our protector, guide, and intercessor, so we can continue with the mission you dreamed, an indigenous church. Hala, hala, Maria Pedro, in the glory, in the Lord's glory. The road that Maria Pedro left us is to keep going on, and her presence will always be present in our actions. Blessings, Ana Maria Vargas, co-member. This I'd like to end. Mary Peter, you know, you said at the table, did a lot of talking about different poetry she read, Aztec sayings. She never said this Aztec saying, that's one of my favorites, and I will end with this. The Aztec saying says, though I am wounded, I am not dead. Let me sit here and rest a while, and then I will rise and carry on.
Alicia Ramirez. Much will be said about Guatemala, so I'm not going to say anything. I just want to say something about Mary Peter's last ministry, which I very much appreciated. She was one of the ones who went with us on Sundays to meet the immigrant bus at in Louisville at the Greyhound station. And if there were Spanish speakers, she was our best ambassadress, but especially if there were children, she was just gifted to relate with them. And so she was a great teacher, a wonderful extrovert in the best sense, and a great, great part of the bus ministry.
Mary Kay Brannon. I met Mary Peter for the first time when she came back from Bolivia. And I was living with Angie Murphy, and that's what brought her to St. Rose's in St. Louis. She was really one of my best friends. She was, and we lived together for a couple years in a house. And what the most beautiful thing about the times that I can remember is her sharing and reflection. We would have prayer together every night, my dog sitting on her lap, looking at me like, oh, see, this is too. Just in case you don't know it, I'm here too. But anyway, she would, any scripture or reading that she said, it was always a very deep spiritual gift for me. She has a very deep love of God. And I think that when we say, love God with your whole heart, soul, and mind, and love others as God loves you, she was the perfect, she did that. So I'll miss you, Mary Peter.
Oops. Nancy Whitwer. I never had the privilege of living with Peter, except the short time that I've been here at Loretto Mother House. But this morning, the Feast of St. Lawrence, I thought, isn't this the most appropriate day for us to be celebrating Mary Peter? Lawrence was ordered by the emperor to bring to him all of the church's treasures. So he rounded up the poor and took them to the emperor and said, here are our treasures. Now, doesn't that sound like Peter? Here are our treasures. And it cost him, of course, his life. Now, Peter had such love for the people of the Altiplano that I truly believe she would have been willing to lay down her life for them.
Johanna Bryan. As Nancy said, like Nancy, I never lived with Peter, never had the privilege of living with her or working with her. And the only time I was around her in any extended way was when I moved back here to the Mother House 3 years ago. But in that little short time, I got to know her quite well. She was always interested in what I was doing, always interested in talking about any issues that had anything to do with helping anyone who needed help. But what I remember about her most is how glad I always was to be at her table. It was refreshing in mind and spirit to be with her and talk with her and laugh with her. She had a wonderful sense of humor and always enjoyed conversation. Okay, anyone else? All right, Eileen, seems like we're finished here at the Mother House. We'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. We are going to go to first to Gloria in Guatemala. And Gloria, I'm going to ask you to start your video if you can.
Sí, ya estoy. Bueno, creo que agradecerle a Dios por la vida de María Pedro, ¿verdad? Creo que ha sido una gracia el haberla conocido y también la oportunidad que nos ha permitido de conocer a la congregación. Así que solamente decirle a María Pedro, gracias por los momentos que hemos podido compartir. Gracias por permitirme también a vivir otras experiencias y que me ha ayudado pues a crecer tanto a nivel personal, a nivel espiritual y sobre todo conocer esa opción de vida que ella tuvo, ¿verdad? Especialmente esa opción por la gente más pobre y necesitada. Así que gracias María Pedro.
We now have a video.
Please, I'd like to offer the translation.
Thank you, Cassandra.
In
Okay.
English, if I may.
Thank you.
She's thankful for this great opportunity to know other co-members of the community and to thank Maria Pedro for all of her teachings, and she's helped me grow in my life, but especially she helped me grow spiritually, and she reaffirmed my commitment with the poor. So I give thanks for Maria Pedro.
Thank you, Cassandra. And now, Rosario. I think that we might need to unmute there. If Rosario, Cassandra, if you could ask.
Rosario, querida hermana Rosario, por favor, tiene que prender su micrófono del Zoom porque quieren escuchar por Zoom sus palabras. ¿Puede prender su micrófono? Gracias. Just give her 1 second. She's gonna
No problem.
work on unmuting there.
No problem. We're so happy to see everyone.
Con calma, hermana. Están diciendo que es una gran alegría contar con su participación y la participación de todas las hermanas de Guatemala. Okay, so I think Rosario is suggesting that Reina take the floor at this time while Rosario works on unmuting her microphone. So can we give the floor to Reina, please?
Can you tell me, or can someone tell me the name of the device that Reina is using so I can spotlight her and unmute her?
A ver, Reina, ¿cuál es el aparato? ¿Cuál es la computadora que usted está utilizando? Y Rosa, Oh,
Sí,
they're
empiece a
doing
hablar,
it by
Reina,
WhatsApp.
para que la puedan ver.
Rosa, I think I lost Bolivia. If you can have them call me again. It's just busy, so I'm gonna. Bolivia.
I could also, while we're trying to get the audio working, I could share the video, the wonderful video that came from Guatemala. Did I do that?
Yes.
Esta cuestión. Bueno, mira, no hay problema. ¿Quién habla? ¿Rosario? Mira, Rosario o Reina, habla muy fuerte, grita y yo voy a traducir al inglés, ¿ok? Adelante, hermana.
Cassandra, are we ready with?
Yes,
Great.
we're gonna be ready with somebody. Just 1 second, please.
Okay, thank you.
Reina, ¿puedes comenzar otra vez, por favor? Reina, adelante, hermana.
En nuestra querida región, su fidelidad al Señor. Las acompañamos con nuestras oraciones por la partida de María Pedro, que desde el cielo
Dear sisters, good afternoon. Greetings from the Loreto community of Honduras. We send our most heartfelt condolences for the loss of Maria Peter, who now is in heaven. We are sure that she is resting in peace in the presence of God, and we thank God, Mother God, and Father God. We are thankful for all that Maria Pedro did and all that she was, especially her work in Guatemala, her profound service for the poor, and her loyalty to God. For all of her participation, we know that in heaven she is looking down and sending blessings to our congregation. And we thank her for all of her missions and all of her life work.
Thank you, Cassandra. Is there anyone else, either Cassandra or Rosa, in Guatemala who wishes to share?
Yes, there is. Hermana, ¿quién sigue, por favor?
Querida María Pedro, hoy desde Guatemala queremos dar gracias a Dios por tu vida, por todo el bien que hiciste en tantos lugares a donde el Señor te envió, especialmente con los más necesitados. Nunca olvidaremos que tú y otras hermanas vinieron a Guatemala a conocernos y fruto de ese encuentro, hoy somos congregaciones hermanas y recibimos de ustedes mucho amor y apoyo incondicional. Agradecemos los momentos que estuviste aquí con nosotras, tu alegría, tu bondad, tu amor, tu búsqueda para responder a tantas necesidades. Personalmente, no olvidaré nuestro encuentro en El Paso. Tus ojos brillaban al hablarte de Guatemala, de las hermanas y de la gente que aquí conociste. Me queda tu sonrisa, tu amor, tu bondad y el cuadro de la Virgen de Guadalupe que me regalaste. Sin duda, nuestra amada Lupita te tomó de la mano y te llevó a Jesús. En nombre de las hermanas de Guatemala, te digo gracias, María Pedro. Descansa en la paz del Señor. Entra al reino que Él prometió a todos sus servidores y tú eres una de ellas. Hasta siempre, María Pedro. Gracias, hermanas de Loreto, por su amor, por siempre estar con nosotras. Las amamos, las recordamos hoy especialmente.
Beloved Maria Pedro, from Guatemala, we thank God for your life and all the good you did everywhere that God sent you to do work and to serve the most needy. We will never forget you and the other sisters who came to Guatemala, and the fruit of your time with us is that now we are sister congregations, and we really love and rejoice in the support and sharing that we have. We're grateful for the times we had together with Maria Pedro, and we remember and cherish her for her joy and her generosity and her love, and how she always sought to respond to the needs of those who were most needy. Personally, I remember our time together in El Paso. I remember how Maria Pedro's eyes shone bright when she spoke of Guatemala and the sisters she had known there. I cherish the memory of her smile and her love and the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe that she gave me. Without a doubt, Guadalupe took Maria Pedro's hand and led her to Jesus, to Jesus. On behalf of the Sisters of Guatemala, I want to hail the life work of Maria Pedro. May she rest in peace and enter heaven, where she will be celebrated as a server of God. Thank you for all the love, and we're feeling the love of our sister congregation in the north, especially now, especially in this moment. Hermana Juana María, ¿alguien más quiere compartir?
Buenas tardes, queridas hermanas de Loreto. Me van a permitir que le hable a María Pedro, porque ella está presente sin duda en este acto solemne en honor a ella. Querida María Pedro, tengo en mi corazón tu sonrisa, tu alegría, tu sentido de optimismo en todo. Te queremos agradecer todo lo que hiciste para que se fundara el hermanamiento con Loreto. Ya María José decía en un mensaje, ella fue una de las pioneras del hermanamiento con Loreto. Te quiero agradecer todo lo que hiciste por Chantla, todo lo que hiciste por cada una de las alumnas que a este centro vienen a formarse. Gracias. Gracias por escoger a Guatemala, sobre todo a los indígenas. Los pueblos apartados. Gracias por todos esos meses que pasaste en Ichihuán. Te admiré a pesar de tus limitaciones. Caminabas a las aldeas, estabas con las mujeres, estabas con los niños, con los jóvenes, con los catequistas y, ¿por qué no, con la diócesis? Gracias, María Pedro. Te fuiste y el Señor te recibió con un gran banquete, estoy segura. Disculpen, hermanas, mi emoción.
Good afternoon, sisters of Loreto. I'm going to speak about Maria Pedro. I feel she is here with us today in this solemn ceremony. Sister Maria Pedro is remembered for her smile, her joy, her unflagging optimism. And we thank you, Sister Maria Pedro, for all that you did to forge the sisterhood between us and Loreto. You were a pioneer of our unity. We thank you for your work in Chantla with each student who came to study with us. We thank you for choosing Guatemala and for your commitment with indigenous peoples and for the work you did in Shillong. I admired you, the way you transcended any challenge and walked in the villages and worked with the women and the children and the catechists and the dioses. Thank you, Maria Pedro. You have left, but I am sure that God has welcomed you. And forgive me for being so profoundly moved in this moment.
¿Alguien más de Guatemala?
Does Isabel want to share, Cassandra?
Hermana Isabel, ¿usted quiere tomar la palabra? ¿O otra hermana tiene algo que compartir?
Aquí de la comunidad de Uspantán, solo quiero decir unas palabras que agradecemos la presencia también de María Pedro aquí en esta región, al norte de Guatemala, una región donde fue duramente golpeada en la guerra de los 80. La opción de María Pedro era bien clara, pues también decidió venir a estos pueblos y estuvo aquí en la comunidad de Uspantán. Estuvo visitando alguna comunidad y como decían ya las hermanas, era sencilla, era cercana a la gente. Recuerdo que aquí había una niña muy pobre, que visitaba nuestra casa, Maruquita, y se acercó a ella y le hacía chiste. Y Maruquita no entendía su idioma, ¿verdad? Porque ella era esquiché, pero hizo lo posible María Pedro para hacerse amiga de esta niña. Yo creo que María Pedro tenía ese don de ser muy cercana, pues ya las hermanas han dicho la mayoría, todo lo que ella era, su opción. Yo quiero agradecerle de todo corazón por esa vida tan profunda de María Pedro. Y como decían las hermanas, ella está ya gozando en el cielo y seguramente que ella tiene otra misión. Y la misión es de seguir pidiendo por todo este mundo, especialmente en estos momentos tan difíciles que está pasando la gente y los más pobres, que al final son los que más sufren. Gracias, María Pedro. Y gracias a su hermana también la conocimos cuando estuvimos allá, una mujer también sencilla y sensible seguramente como María Pedro. Y gracias a todas las hermanas de Loreto, que aquí las tenemos en oración y en nuestro corazón.
So I'd like to say a few words on behalf of the community of Uspantán. I want to thank Maria Pedro for her life's work, which included working in the northern part of Guatemala, which was particularly hard hit by the war in the 1980s. We all know that Maria Pedro had a profound commitment, and that commitment included working in Uspantán and visiting communities here, She was renowned for her humbleness and her great gift at establishing rapport. There was a little girl who was a Quiche, indigenous girl named Marulquita, and she only spoke Quiche, but nonetheless, Maria Pedro had such warmth that she managed to find ways to joke around with this little girl and even become her friend. And I share that with you because Maria Pedro was really truly blessed with a gift for connecting with people from all walks of life. And her sisters and her communities all have admired that wherever she's been. And I am thankful for Maria Pedro's deep love, which she manifested in her life's work. And I know she is in heaven and has taken up yet another mission. I'm sure she is praying for the world at this time of suffering, especially for the poor. So thank you, Maria Pedro. And also, I have fond memories of her sister, who was also a humble and sensitive woman. And I'd also just want to express my gratitude to all of the sisters of Loreto for being with us. And I want you to know that you are in our prayers and in our hearts.
Thank you. Are other
Muchas gracias.
friends and sisters in Guatemala wishing to share?
¿Alguna otra hermana en Guatemala tiene algo que compartir?
I think for now we will go to Ana Maria in Bolivia.
Bueno,
And
vamos a dar la palabra a Ana María en Bolivia.
we can always return to Guatemala if we have missed someone.
Siempre podemos regresar a Guatemala si falta alguien que también quiere participar.
But
Adelante,
we have our co-member Ana Maria Vargas
Ana
in
María
Bolivia.
Vargas. Adelante, por favor.
En principio, un saludo y mis sentimientos a toda la comunidad. Yo quiero compartir en este momento la alegría del Evangelio, recordando de su último viaje que vino a La Paz, Cochabamba, el Altiplano, el 2014. Era quizá el último encuentro en estos lugares donde ella se sentía tan contenta, tan feliz de encontrar en el paso a estudiantes de Loreto, a las tahuacos de Radio San Gabriel, a Javier Albó, a Calixto, que es el diácono que actualmente está dando mucho por la iglesia indígena, y muchos de los catequistas por Corpa. Creo que también tuvimos la oportunidad de hacer un viaje a ver las obras de Vicky Cuatman, para ver a los voluntarios en el norte de Potosí. Y al finalizar de ese año, empezamos a preguntarnos, ¿qué busca la comunidad con los viajes que hace María Pedro? ¿Quiénes somos? Y al final encontramos que somos dos personas que nos gusta recorrer el mundo. ¿Por qué? Por la justicia social y la lucha por los derechos de las mujeres. Aquí la llamamos María Pedro, la piedrita, es la alegría del Evangelio. que llena los corazones y la vida eterna. María Pedro sustentaba una nueva etapa de la evangelización, una marca de la alegría y renovar la comunicación permanente. Quiero agradecer, por otro lado, toda esta experiencia recogida, ella siempre estará presente. Creo que María Pedro, si bien está ahora por aquí un poco ausente, no estará ausente porque las acciones con ese evangelio de la alegría siempre nos levantará. Quiero dar un mensaje que acaba de llegar de la organización de las mujeres, de 600 mujeres que trabajamos en los barrios de La Paz, que hacen llegar su reconocimiento a la hermana María Pedro, a esos momentos que con ellas convivió, que con ellas logró, y que en este último, fue el último programa y proyecto que habríamos llevado, no hagas en acción por una buena alimentación. En este momento de crisis, hermanas de Loreto, muchas gracias. María Pedro está presente. El Evangelio de la Alegría también. A nombre de toda mi familia y a nombre de todo este pueblo boliviano, agradecemos y con seguridad María Pedro estará en el corazón de todas, así como a Lilian. Lilian con seguridad también seguirá y sigue los pasos, y cada una de las que están presentes. Un abrazo y hasta pronto.
First of all, I'd like to extend my warm greetings to you, sisters, and also my condolences. But also, I'd like to focus on the joy that we find in the Word of God. On her last trip to Bolivia in 2014, Maria Pedro traveled to La Paz and to the Altiplano, the highlands of Bolivia, and she was happy to visit a lot of the projects and students that she had worked with, such as the Radio San Gabriel and her colleagues of the Indigenous Church and the catechists and the volunteers in the north of Potosi. And at one point we asked ourselves, well, what are we as a community trying to achieve with these visits and with this work that is what Maria Pedro has dedicated her life to? And the answer is we're seeking social justice. We're committed to this struggle and to achieving women's rights. And you know, Maria Pedro had a nickname here. Pedro, of course, is Peter. It's from the Greek of rock. And here in Bolivia, Maria Pedro was known as the Little Rock, La Pedrita. And really, she helped to usher in a new phase of evangelization. And so I'm thankful for all the experiences that we shared. And I'm also confident that really Maria Pedro lives on in her work, which continues to flourish here. I received a message from the women from the neighborhoods in La Paz, where Maria Pedro worked. It was one of her last projects here. It was a program to improve the nutrition of the women and their children. And really, there's no doubt that Maria Pedro is present in this and other wonderful projects that she was a part of, and really spreading the word of God with so much joy. We all carry Maria Pedro in our heart, and we all are committed to following in her footsteps. I send you a warm embrace.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Ana. Gracias.
So now we are going to go
Ahora
from
vamos
Bolivia to the Loretto Infirmary,
de
where
Bolivia
Marian McAvoy
a la
would like to share. Marian,
Bolivia,
we see you.
Okay. Well, I owe a lot to Peter. I've had so many experiences because of her.
Yo
And
compartí tantísimo con María
was there
Pedro.
any, pardon me?
You're good, Marian. You can just
Okay,
continue.
go on. Well, it's just to share, and I thought it would be, you know, so many places, as I say, because of Peter, I've been able to. She lived with us for a while in Denver. Also, you know, I lived with her in St. Louis, and always, you know, Peter was someone you learned from and had such fun. But the thing I want to tell you about, just a little, one of the last things we did is we were going to go to a conference, I think it was above Quito, Ecuador. But what, I said to Peter, we were going to film Peter talking about the whole trip, and aimed. So I had this camera, which was, you know, supposedly, and Peter was ready to introduce the whole conference and who was going to be there and all that. So I'm holding it up and taking her, but it is so heavy. It keeps going down. Pretty soon I'm just taking the picture of Peter's feet. And so that's it. So then we try again. So we do it, go down again. And she said, no, we're not, that's not going to work. So we went on to the conference, but, and it included people, representatives of all the nations in Latin America. And a lot of them were the natives, the people that lived in the villages and the language. And that was when this young man who had just had difficulties in South Africa, right, came. And because he was there, Peter was translating everybody to him, for him. Therefore, I got to be the recipient also. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. But I've always learned, Peter and I have been together a lot, and I've always learned with Peter, and I'm grateful for all that she added to my life. So thank you for coming to that. And I hope that somebody heard it, at least Peter did, and that's good.
Thank you, Marian. So now we're going to go to El Paso first to see if there's anyone there who would like to share. And what I would suggest all of you in Loretto land and elsewhere do is put your screen on speaker view so that the person who is speaking is the person whose screen you will see. If there's anyone in El Paso who would like to share, just please unmute yourself. I think you can do that. And share. Buffy.
This is Buffy Bozen. You know, Peter is everything all of you have said. Eleanor, you did an incredible job of creating a picture of Peter's life for us. However, you did leave out a little thing that all of us who have lived with Peter for a week or a month or many years. So Peter loved going out to eat. And she would go to breakfast with person A and bring home the leftovers. And then she would have that for lunch. And then she was
often not hungry for supper, but she'd eat a little something. But the woman had the biggest social life of anybody I ever knew, and she saw more movies. If she went with Kathleen Vonderhaar, if she went with Nancy Finneran, I don't know, she must have had somebody for every genre of movie. I don't think she ever missed one. So everything you said is very true. Peter was a good friend and a prophet in her own way. But also she had a lot of fun.
Thanks, Buff. Is there anyone else in El Paso who would like to share? If so, just unmute yourself, please, and speak.
This is,
Pilar.
No, Pilar.
Pilar.
This is Pilar Gonzalez. Mary Peter was my person. I don't know if you have seen Grey's Anatomy show, but these two friends, they were each other their person. Mary Peter was my person. And then she also was my person to become a co-member. So we spent many hours either in her house or she would come to my classroom and she would intertwine I Am the Way along with her stories and adventures in Bolivia. And although she said she loved El Paso dearly, I mean, I guess she loved Bolivia a little bit more. So yeah, we study I Am the Way, but she intertwined it with her adventures and stories. She changed my life for better, of course, and my family's life in so many ways. I will always be profoundly thankful for having her in my life, and I will not cry. She used to say, I mean, when she was in the classroom with me, if you know me, I talk a lot and I laugh a lot. That every single time I was laughing, it was a prayer. So I will be praying for her. Thank you.
Thank you, Pilar. Elisa Rodriguez wanted to speak, and I know Liz Dinez did too. So Elisa, could you unmute yourself, please? Thank you. And just speak.
I am.
There you go.
Okay. Peter lived with me from 2009 to 2015, something like that. She had originally come to teach English on the other side of the mountain. And she had classes there in one or two parishes where people were coming to learn how to speak English. But this is my last experience with Peter. My little dog died, and I just made a mental promise to myself that she was going to be the last one. Well, Peter harassed me for 3 whole months on a regular basis. Aren't we going to get a dog? I want us to get a dog. And so finally, we went to the shelter and we found this little mutt. And her name is Nila. So I knew that I was going to have to take care of this little Nila because Peter was always on the road to somewhere else. But anyway, Peter used to have her for 2 days. 2 days of, while I was at work, Peter would take care of Nila. She took her to the federal courthouse to picket for anti-war, for the death penalty, for whatever the issue was. And then she also took her to visit some women who used to come to collect the Social Security checks for their deceased husbands. And they would stay at one of the Annunciation houses and she would go and have lunch with them. And of course, Nila had to go too. So my dog became very much of a social justice advocate, thanks to Mary Peter.
And I'm Alicia Franco. And Mary Peter came when we opened the Liceo Sylvan school that we opened at Guardian Angel School for people who did not speak English. And we became really good friends. She was the teacher and I raised money. And Mary Peter had such a sense of humor. At that time, there were lots of people coming from Guatemala, Nicaragua, Honduras. And I probably shouldn't say this on air, but I'm going to say it. We would take the students who were coming, who wanted to go to their families in other parts of the country. And so we would dress them up like college students and we'd put them on the plane. And one day, Mary Peter was going up the stairs with this young man from, I don't remember where, and the immigration stopped her. And I was like 20 feet behind her because we always, whenever we were taking people to the airlines, we wanted to make sure that they got to the right plane because they didn't speak English or Spanish. So Mary Peter is stopped, and I don't know what she said to the immigration officer, but she talked her way out of it, and she put her hand on the young man's shoulder and walked him to Southwest Airlines and got him on the plane. And so Mary Peter and I did things that we probably should have been in jail because I learned a lot from Mary Peter and she learned a lot from me. And so we were a great team. And when she left, I really missed her because we were a great team.
Thank you. Good trouble.
Amen.
Now to Liz Dinez.
Well, you can't imagine the things we did.
Hi, this is Mary Margaret. Liz and I are sharing her computer. What I want to say about Mary Peter has already been said, but I just want to emphasize that she would go to the nth degree, like Alicia just shared, to help anybody who was in need. And she would also plant seeds of justice and compassion and care and culture wherever she went. I remember probably the last person I was involved that I know Mary Peter helped with was a young woman by the name of Kayleen, who came from El Salvador, was a refugee and was at Villa Maria, who did not know how to print her name or could not say any letters of the alphabet. And Mary Peter was leaving in about 3 weeks, and she said, I will go and help Kayleen every day I can. And during that time, more than even teaching Kayleen to write her name and showing her how to do letters and pronunciation, what she taught Kayleen was Kayleen could do it. And I think Mary Peter showed and taught and loved people to death, showing them that they could do it.
Mary Margaret, did Liz also want to say something? No pressure, just before we leave El Paso.
I would like to say something.
Hi, Liz.
Hi.
Okay.
I'm not going to say much because if I do, I'm going to start really ugly crying right now. But Peter will always have a place in my heart, and she's just a lot of fun and a lot of good stories and a lot of good jokes. And yeah. And evidently also tacos at Jack in the Box. So gotta love it.
Thank you, Liz. And now, Pat?
Yes. I met Mary Peter at a very special time in my life. I grew up on the East Coast. I'd never heard of the Loretto sisters, but I was ready to retire, and I knew I wanted to get involved in things in El Paso on the border here. And I met Mary P. I met her at All Saints Church at the parish, and we had done a survey and to see what we were interested in. And I said immigration and peace. And so we broke out into groups, and she came and she was interested in doing immigration. And we each told our stories, and so we collaborated. No, I didn't. I had ideas that we wanted to do something, but she knew how to do everything. She knew how to put in English and Spanish in the parish bulletin every week one of the myths about immigration, and things like that. She was a teacher, and she taught me so much and mentored me. And I loved it. And when they did the archives, Eleanor, was it, said something about revealing ourselves to us. Something about seeing what she, sharing what she saw in me, because she just enabled me to do so many things that I had never even thought about doing. Part of it was right away after I retired, she took me on an immigration immersion trip to Nogales, Arizona and Sonora. And I met so many of the sisters and the co-members there on that trip. That was such an I learned so much on that trip. And then I lived about 5 or 6 miles past where Elisa's house was, where Mary Peter was living. So I would stop there on my way to any meeting I was going to, and just tell her where I was going, and she was ready to go, whether it was a border mass or something about Annunciation House or with the migrant families, and anything. But the other thing she helped me with was I was asked to work against the death penalty, and I knew nothing about it. And she was in Washington for some conference and came back with all these materials from Catholic Mobilizing Network. She just enabled me. Anything I wanted to learn about or needed to learn about, she was, she already knew about it. And so she would share everything and help me to make up a flyer. And she was so good at the computer. And I just enjoyed so much taking her to anything at the Annunciation House. And just last week when I got word that she was passing away, and I emailed Ruben Garcia, and he wrote back, he said, all I can say is Mary Peter, it was one of a kind, and get ready, heaven. And then the next day when she passed away, he said, heaven is rejoicing, because she just had so much to give. She helped me do migrant posadas every Christmas at the parishes, just so many things. I just feel like, and when I went to the Mother House for the co-member in process retreat back in June of 2015, she was moving there at the same time, and she told me go a few days early, and she took me to Gethsemane to learn more about Thomas Merton. And then she took me the next day, we went to Shakertown or Shaker Village, and to learn about that. She just, opened up the world to me. I can't tell you how grateful I am for all that she enabled me to do. And she's such a special friend. And we'll miss her very much.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in El Paso who wishes to share? If so, unmute right away and speak so that the camera goes to you. And if not, we're going to move to Denver now. So any of you in Denver who wish to share, just unmute, please. And this is Robert Bruce.
Hi, it looks like I'm in San Francisco, but I'm not. That's where my daughter goes, to USF. It's a social justice school. I guess that's in Patsy's tradition. I want to thank the Loretto community for all they gave to Patsy. One of the best memories I have was Patsy's 50th Jubilee. It was a time at Loretto, at the Mother House, where we all met as a family, healthy, happy, and together. Those things, they don't happen as often as you want, or maybe you need, but it was a great time. So thanks to the community. Patsy was important to you, but you were important to her too. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Others in Denver? If there isn't anyone else in Denver who unmutes and speaks right now.
Pat?
Pat McCormick? Hi, Pat.
Yeah, hi. Everything has been said, really, about how wonderful Mary Peter was. What I want to remember is the community that we had together in La Paz as we gathered in order to figure out the future of the school, and the great, great fun that we had with slumber parties and so many sisters from other communities, because we had a central house for sisters of all different communities and different countries. And so I'm delighted to be with all of you, and especially with the Bolivianos, and most especially with Jenny Ibargorray. Jenny was she is right here with us. She was one of my favorite students, and we have kept track with each other. We haven't been terribly successful, but Jenny, I want you to know that I love you a lot. And Bolivia, being in Bolivia, changed my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Anyone else in Denver? Please unmute and speak.
I just wanted to share a memory on a border trip. We would go to this place called Grupo Beta, and the purpose of it is that we were supposed to listen to the folks that had just been deported. And as I looked around, Mary Peter was sitting on a bench, and all the people that had been deported were sitting on the ground looking up at her, and she was telling them a story. And they had so much respect, and it was just so sweet and so unexpected. Madre, they kept calling her Madre, and that's just a special memory that I have.
Thank you, Maureen. And Mary Helen, it looks like you would like to share.
Well, I actually,
it's Anna.
Anna at Mary Helen's. We're having a little Emmaus housing meeting here tonight. But I'm so glad that I could kind of tap in here, because I just wanted to share the story of Mary Peter's move to Osceola. And someone can stop me if Mary Ann already told that. But Mary Peter brought a little pine tree with her and planted it in the backyard at Osceola. And that pine tree today is huge. I mean, we used to decorate it with lights, but it's way bigger than it would be possible to do that now. And as I have sat at the counter and looked at that tree since Mary Peter's death, I have thought, now that tree is a wonderful symbol for her life. She brought it, she planted it, and just like Mary Peter, it grew and grew and grew. And that's kind of my experience of Mary Peter, that she is such an open person, so loving and so attractive to younger people. I can't tell you how many young friends she had. Well, of course, she's a very interesting person, but I just wanted to say that about the tree, because that's a very special symbol for me of the bigness of Mary Peter's heart and her generosity and all that she became up to death and beyond.
Mm. Thanks, Anna. Magdalena.
Yes. I want to share something with Robert. I hope he's still on. Robert, are you the little brother? So we were in the novitiate, and Mary Peter's family came to visit and then left. And in the refectory, we always had reading. And it was a story about relationships with a brother, little brothers, and she just broke down, and of course, you know, got in trouble for it because you weren't supposed to have any emotions around your family then. But I just want Robert to know that she loved him so much and still does.
Well,
so,
I appreciate that, and I'm sure Juan does too. Thank you.
yes. Mary Peter and I met on the train from Louisville to Loretto. And there were about 15 of us on the train from St. Louis, Denver, El Paso, and a couple other places. And by the time we got to Loretto, we had bonded. And the last thing we did was threw our packs of cigarettes out to the wind out from the caboose. And when we arrived, there were 22 of us. And after, you know, getting settled somewhat, we used to line up 2 by 2, and we would march to, this is the Army, Mr. Jones, only we changed the words, like we're the nifty 22. And Mary Peter was always, she was so intense about anything she did, and funny, and she just, even when she tried to be serious, she would break out into a laugh. And then when we were novices, Martha sent both of us to the kitchen. I think she wanted to fatten us up. And so we worked in the kitchen, I don't know how long, but Mary Peter is cleaning the stove one day, and Sister Priscilla and I can't remember the other sister's name, not Jane Marie. Anyway, she walked by and she said to Mary Peter, you need to use a little elbow grease on that. So Mary Peter disappears. She leaves the kitchen and went out probably to the storeroom and came back, and 10 minutes later, and she said, I've looked all over. I cannot find the elbow grease. So, she was just, she was so young, for one, and so alive, and she never lost that. She never lost that wonderful connection with just really being herself. I miss you, Peter.
Thank you, Magdalena. We're going to go back to Mary Helen's house now to hear from Mary Helen. Let me just... There you go.
Well, I have a lot to say, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to say how much Mary Peter meant to me and what an inspiration that she was and continues to be. And Lillian, I wanted you to know that I hold you tenderly in my heart. And I join with all of you in grieving the loss of Mary Peter and in sharing the joy of Mary Peter. Because as so many of you have said, there is no question, she was absolutely a joy. So I join with all of you in both of those things.
Thank you, Mary Helen. I have a message from the folks in Guatemala that they are not understanding. Cassandra, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I've got both telephones right here.
Okay.
I'm hearing voices in Guatemala.
Okay. Javier in Guatemala, I don't know that person, needs some translation.
A ver, Javier, ¿quiere tomar la palabra?
Thank you. Now, is there anyone else in Denver?
Yes, me.
Who's that?
Regina.
Regina, hang on.
Hang on,
let me just spotlight you. Hold on.
Okay.
There you are.
Hi. What I wanted to say is I have the pleasure of and honor of working with Michelle Bruce Irwin at St. Mary's Academy, who I've known for the whole time she's been there. And I find in Michelle a lot of Lillian and a lot of Mary Peter. I see the love of people, the delight in being together. I see her absolute passion for justice, and I just am very excited to know that Mary Peter really lives on in this wonderful young person, and it's a pleasure to be able to watch that with her. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Anyone else in Denver? Unmute and speak, please. So let's go to the world of the United Nations. I think there are several people from that part of Mary Peter's life who may want to speak. So if anyone whose primary connection with Mary Peter was at the UN would like to share, this would be a good time for you to unmute and speak.
Hola. Habla Rosa.
Yes.
Yo quería saludar a todos en Guatemala, en Bolivia y todos los hispanoparlantes antes, pero queríamos darle lugar a otras también. María Pedro, por cierto, está celebrando hoy porque esta gran celebración es como lo hubiera querido, incluyendo las hermanas de Guatemala, las amigas de Bolivia y toda la comunidad. Era su espíritu de veras de hablar por los menospreciados, los marginalizados. Y para mí, María Pedra era como mi abuelita mexicana en Nueva York. Llegó a mi vida en un momento que lo necesitaba. Ella fue la que me introdujo a Loreto en un tiempo que yo buscaba algún tipo de conexión espiritual y ella era muy determinada, quería que me hiciera comiembro y le dije, pues, si la comunidad puede aceptarme a mí, a mi compañera y a mi familia, entonces sí. Y lo que hicimos es, dijo, pues, ¿por qué no tomamos un viaje a la casa madre? Y eso hicimos los 5 con María Pedro manejando también el carro y conoció a mi familia, su hermana Lilian, que le extiendo mi pésame por parte de mí y mi familia. Me dijo el otro día que María Pedro quería mucho a tu familia, quería mucho a tus hijos, hija e hijo. Entonces para mí ese es el espíritu de María Pedro, que siempre hablaba por los menospreciados, por la gente que a veces no tenía voz, siempre con alegría y un espíritu muy positivo. Por eso siempre voy a estar agradecida de ella. Sé que le prendimos la veladora a la Virgen, sé que está allí, nos está ayudando desde el cielo, que el Señor le dé el eterno descanso, que busca para ella la eterna luz, que descanse en paz, así sea. Very briefly in English, I want to say that Maria Pedro is smiling down on us, knowing that this celebration is in her spirit of inclusivity, of ensuring that the sisters from Guatemala and her friends from Bolivia and others are included in this celebration for her. She was, for me, my Mexican grandma away from home in New York. She came into my life at the right time. And she was very determined and introduced me to Loreto. Was very persistent and said, please come to the Mother House. And I said, well, if Loreto and the folks in the Mother House can accept me and my family, then I'm there. So we took a road trip with Mary Peter driving sometimes. And you know, Mary Peter, she used to love to talk. So she would like turn around and I'm watching the road and we're going off the road. I'm like, Mary Peter, look this way. She really, she got to know my family and she loved my family. And Lillian the other day told me, you know, Mary Peter loved your family and she loved your kids. And that meant so much. So thank you so much, Lillian. You know that Mary Peter is helping us from where she is in heaven. She went in peace to help us. And I also want to mention my friend Marta Benavides, who introduced us from El Salvador. Marta also sends her very best, and she knows, she said, I have spoken to Mary Peter and she's present and she's helping us. And so may she rest in peace. Amen.
Thank you so much, Rosa, for sharing. And thank you, Rosa, for doing so much work to find Cassandra and to make sure that we figured out a way to provide translation to our community in Bolivia and Guatemala tonight and going forward. Thank you. Anyone else in the world, in the zone of the UN, who would like to speak? Please unmute and speak if you would care to share.
I will.
Beth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eileen.
There you are.
Here I am. Thank you. Muchas gracias por todo. I'm so grateful that there are people all over the world here this evening remembering Mary Peter. That's only appropriate. She taught me what it means to be a truly global citizen. And she did in so many ways just flow seamlessly among cultures and languages and genders, and she would strike up a conversation with anyone. Peter was my pathway into Loreto as well. I know I'm in good company here with so many of you. I actually met Peter because I was writing a paper on the women church movement in graduate school. And one of my colleagues had told me she was on the national board. And so I went and interviewed her thinking maybe I'll get 20 minutes, half an hour of this sister's time. Well, as you might imagine, I walked out 3 hours later with my head spinning. And what comes to me now, more so even than Mary Peter's wonderful work at the UN, was the fact that she shared her house with me for over 2 years when I was a graduate student in Denver, not making any money. I do believe it was Anne Spillane's family home. So thank you, Anne, as well. All we did was we paid the utilities and we had a wonderful flow of people in and out of that house. Vicki Krotman would stay with us. You never knew who you were going to come home to, which I just loved about living with Mary Peter. And and Rosa, your story of the road trip helped me remember I did drive once down to New Mexico with Peter. She drove the whole way. I have never gotten to New Mexico faster, and I have never said more Hail Marys in one trip in my entire life. But it was wonderful. It was amazing. We got to meet people in Taos and Santa Fe. And I'll share just one small story that I shared with Lillian the other day, who could actually relate quite well to it. The only thing I've ever seen take Mary Peter down was a little mouse. Because there was a little mouse that got into the basement, which is where Mary Peter had her bedroom. I have never seen her move so fast. She was, I can't remember if it was a chair or a table, but she was up on top of that thing faster than you could say, jump. I was just so amazed that this woman, who is my role model in so many ways, who traveled the world and spoke 7 languages and was teaching herself Mandarin to go to the Women's World Conference in Beijing. And so I dutifully went upstairs and I got my cat and I brought him downstairs, and he caught the mouse and we took it outside and all was well. And Peter is such an amazing role model. She always will be, forever and ever. May she rest in peace, with gratitude from so many of us. And let Loreto be Loreto forever. Love you, Irma. Muchas gracias. Abrazos.
Thank you, Beth. Anyone else from the UN realm before we move to
Hi,
other...
this is Shannon Matthew. I'm a former Loreto volunteer.
Hi, yeah.
I worked with Mary Peter at the UN office, I think in 2007 and 2008. And, you know, as everyone has said, she was just an extraordinary role model. But I wanted to say in particular that it was so inspiring to me to watch her move through the UN, because it's an environment that structurally, I think, can be a bit hostile to women, to civil society, to outsiders. And she was just always so bold. She just went where she wanted and she spoke to who she wanted. She never doubted our right to be there, our right to have a voice, the importance of our voices being there. So that was a real inspiration to me. And I think has really shaped my life since being a Loretto volunteer, having that example to remember. So I'm really grateful to her for that, and to Barb Mecker, and to Rosa and Sally and Beth and the whole Loretto community. It's really, as a community, you've given me so much, and I'll always remember Mary Peter and love her memory. So thank you all.
Thanks a lot for coming this evening, Shannon, and for sharing. It's really good to see you.
Eileen, this is Sally.
Sally, hang on, let me spotlight you.
Okay. Shannon, I was so glad to see that you were with us this evening.
There
Nice
you are.
to see you. I think we might have one or two other Loretto volunteers with us as well this evening. And I guess that's what I want to talk about. So first of all, Mary Peter was a pretty tough act to follow when I went to the UN. She was such a supporter of mine. When I first, I was a co-member in process, and I went to a meeting in St. Louis of the Loretto Women's Network. And at that meeting, Shannon, I believe it was you who had come to St. Louis with Mary Peter, and you made a presentation about your work at the UN. And I remember being so seized with this sense of, oh my God, wouldn't I love to do that kind of work? I wonder how I could get to do that. And at that meeting, I filled out the application form for co-membership. And then later on that year, I met Mary Peter at the Mother House, this weekend experience that Rosa was talking about. The first time I met Mary Peter, first time I met Rosa, first time I met Marcella in Eldon. It was a pretty amazing weekend. First time I met Lisa Reynolds. And it was just wonderful to have a little bit of time to spend with her. And then about maybe a month later, I heard that Mary Peter was ready to finish up she had agreed to go for 4 years. And the following year, she was going to be wanting to be replaced. And so I remember, again, just being filled with this sense of, gee, I wonder if I could do that. And she was in town again, and I asked her to go to lunch with me. And, I hardly knew her. And I barely gave her enough time to sit down at the table before I blurted out to her, I think I want your job. And without skipping a beat, she said, well, then you should come to New York. Come and visit. Come and see what it's like. So I did, and y'all can imagine, how open and warm and loving she was. I spent about a week and a half there, living with her in the convent where she was living, and attending these meetings at the UN, having the same experience Shannon was just talking about. Watching her in action I was just in awe of it all. And then she became a strong supporter of my application for this position. And so for the 9 years that I was there following her, every year when I had a Loretto volunteer come and spend a year with me, that person, Mary Peter made it a point to get to know every one of them. Because, they would always go to the Mother House for their retreats, or Cecily Kern and I went to El Paso and met up with Mary Peter there. But she made it a point to get to know every one of the Loretto volunteers who was working at the UN, and to express her love and support for them personally and for the work they did. She never stopped supporting the work of Loretto at the UN, and it really meant a lot to me. Not even to mention the personal friendship and love that she and I developed for each other. So I miss her lots. Thanks.
Thank you, Sally. We're going to go back to Rosa, who's going to read a message that came from one of our Guatemalan sisters. And she will read it in Spanish, and Cassandra will translate. Rosa, here you go. Thank you.
This is a message from Hermana Dema, who had to sign off.
Rosa, could you please speak up?
Sure. You also have it in your WhatsApp text, Cassandra. Como le decía a Irma Ávila, más que un duelo, es una fiesta de resurrección. Premio que el Dios de la vida le dio a su hija bien amada. Esperándola con una sonrisa y aplausos, porque nuestro Creador y Formador logró sus objetivos con María Pedro. Todos los testimonios que han compartido es lo que Dios le confió a María Pedro. Y María Pedro, con fidelidad y alegría, los hizo realidad. Estando en Tlaxiaco, México, allá en esa comunidad bonita, tuvimos esa reunión tan bella donde intercambiábamos palabras del futuro y esperanza, sellamos nuestro hermanamiento con deseos y una mirada amplia por construir una vida consagrada, abierta y con ideales en conjunto. Se emocionó con el trabajo pastoral y de derechos humanos que teníamos en Tlaxiaco. Gracias, María Pedro, por comulgar con los proyectos de vida. Dejo huellas imborrables, les abrazo, Dema.
As Irma Aguilar said, we're not in mourning, we're really having a celebration of a resurrection of a beloved daughter. God achieved his objectives with Maria Pedro. She fulfilled the work that was entrusted to her by God with loyalty and joy, and she made that vision reality. In Chilacco, Mexico, she shared in the envisioning of a future that was based on shared values and that had a open and heartfelt vision of life. She was inspired and excited by the human rights work that was being done in Chilacco, and she left profound footsteps that we are inspired to follow in.
Thank you, Rosa and Cassandra, for bringing that to us. I'm mindful that we're in many different time zones this evening, and it's getting later, especially in the Eastern time zone. And this has been, this is a more inclusive and more cross-cultural gathering than we often have in the Loreto community. And I'm thinking that for those who may be feeling like it's getting close to bedtime, we're only having the experience that our sisters in Pakistan have every time they join us. So, you know, everybody just rustle around in your chair just a little bit longer, because I think there are a few more people who would like to share. I'm going to open this now to people everywhere, all beings everywhere. And if you would like to share, we'll maybe just take a few more because we need to go back to the mother house to end the wake there. So is there anyone from anywhere who would like to just say something?
I'd love to say something too.
Connie Newton and Kitty, of course. I'm going to go to Connie first and then Kitty.
Okay, so what I love about just all this, the stories of the connections, is that I think Peter had more connections than just about anybody I know. It was like she lived in this giant house and she'd just take you from room to room with her. And so like when I, like maybe 26, 7 years ago when I was a fledgling co-member, and I had the great good fortune of having Pat McCormick and Mary Peter take me under their wing. But Pat showed me all around all the wonderful things that could happen in Denver. And Peter just put all those connections that she had and just took me along with her. When Marianne McAvoy was talking about experience in Ecuador, this is something that I think probably we ought to add to Peter's strengths that haven't been mentioned, because she really had a wide angle lens. It was 1992, and most of the rest of the world was getting ready to celebrate the 500 years of the discovery of America. Well, of course, that wasn't what was in Peter's network at all. She was in the network very much alive because of liberation theology. So she knew there was going to be a gathering in Ecuador of indigenous peoples from up and down the Americas. Not only did she know it, but she figured out how to get funds for those who couldn't travel, Loretta funds for those who couldn't travel. And then there were 7 white people there: Peter, Marianne McAvoy, and Michael Lapsley, the Anglican priest from South Africa who had been injured and will join us, I think, tomorrow at the Mass for Peter. But that lady, she could have run the show, but it was such a powerful time. It was such an alive experience. Thanks very much to Peter, of those people who had been marginalized for centuries were there, and music and dance and song, they told their stories, and the strength and power of that really filled, I think, the hemispheres. So I'm grateful to Peter for her connections. I'm grateful to Peter for her wide angle lens. May it be blessed anew.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Connie. Kitty?
I'll try to be brief, but I didn't know Peter very well. It was like 2000, it must have been the 2014 trip to Bolivia. But she wrote to me and said, Kitty, I'm going to be with my friend Martha in El Salvador, and how would it be if I just came to visit you on my way to Bolivia? It was wonderful. It was just, I felt just so honored that she would come here. And she wanted to know, of course, the mothers in the Casa Materna. So I'm just going to share one quick little story that is a Peter story. And of course, she brought movies too. I wanted to share that. She had carried her movies with her. So we're on our way to the Casa Materna. And of course, we got a little bit of a late start because we were talking and praying. And so it's kind of a long walk, and we were about halfway there. We were on our way to walk with the mothers, walk up the hill and do exercises. And I realized that she was getting a little huffy. Maybe I was getting a little huffy too. So I said, well, how about if we get a taxi the rest of the way? So she goes, that'd be good. So we start watching for a taxi, and no, there's no taxi. And we're kind of, looking at everybody going by. And all of a sudden the police come by in their pickup truck. I guess it was a doble cabina. And they stopped. It must have, they've never stopped for me, so it must have been Peter. But they said, do you need a ride? And we said, yeah, we're going to the Casa Materna. And they said, well, get in and we'll take you. So I just wanted to share that, because we've had these past years a lot of changes in the police here in Nicaragua. They used to be like brothers and sisters, And now they're really an arm of the repressive dictatorship. So it just flashed on me today, you know, I'm going to just start asking Mary Peter if she'll just kind of work her way with those police officers and see if we can do some changing and looking beyond where they are. So I'm glad I can do this without crying, because I've been crying a fair amount. And Lillian and Robert and all who love her so much. I just, all the sisters in Guatemala and everyone in Bolivia, I send my pésame también. So thank you for letting me share that wonderful story.
Thank you, Kitty. I think we're going to go back to the Loretto Mother House conference room now. And turn it back to Johanna. We can't hear you. No, we still can't hear you. No, no sound.
And
there we go. Okay, good.
We're going to bring this wonderful celebration of Mary Peter's life to an end by singing, "We Give You Glory, Thanks, and Praise." We give you glory, thanks, and praise. Oh, bless our works and guide our ways. Glory, 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 glory. We give you glory, thanks, and praise. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
Gracias, Cassandra.
Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, Rosa. Good night, everyone, and hope that many of you can be back tomorrow for the funeral service for Mary Peter at 10 a.m. Eastern. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you, translators. That was awesome.
Yeah.